So in this video, I'll be addressing the importance of being able to adapt to our ever-changing reality. And so much of the change nowadays has to do with the advances taking place in technology. Although on one hand, I'm a little hesitant to share this much of my personal experience, I feel it's the easiest way for me to address these issues. And if by chance you happen to be an influencer, content creator, or if you're building a business online, I think many of you will find what I have to share relevant. So I'm Ben Ufana, and the other day I had a bit of an unsettling conversation with one of my business mentors. I'll start out by relating some background information. So let's dive into it. COVID 19, as it did for so many other people, upended my life. Whereas beforehand, I was offering classes on a weekly basis in New York City and every other week commuting to Boston, where I also offered classes. All of a sudden, that all came screeching to a halt. I was in Sri Lanka as COVID began to spread rapidly beyond China into other parts of the world. I'm flying back on Qatar Airways and getting into New York City just as it's going into lockdown. It was a terrifying reality. And seeing the news reports, all these people just dying all over the place and graphic footage. They were literally stacking coffins in a mass grave in Hart Island in New York City. So I didn't quite know what to do, how I was going to survive, but I realized I had to adapt. And so I threw myself into this whole world of learning to market my work online so that I could build an online presence or practice. Over the past few years, with enormous amounts of effort, time, expense, just burning through a great deal of cash. And yet, a lot of it didn't come naturally to me. All this building of sales funnels, pages, and email marketing campaigns. So much of this work is very technical and the copywriting. I trained for years with a traditional Native American doctor, an actual medicine man from the Kiowa tribe. For me, it's comes more naturally to work in person, preferably one-on-one, but at least in groups, face to face with people. But with our ever-changing reality, as people are spending more time behind the screens of their smartphones and computers and tablets, I have to adapt. So anyway, so I'm having this conversation with one of my business mentors, and I was expressing some of my frustration over the fact that despite my having offered classes for over 10 years in New York City, that much of the work that I had in the city had just disappeared. And yet it's so typical. My experience all these years being in New York City is that people just show up and they abruptly disappear. Week after week, offering these classes, I would be drawing in more people. And it was very disheartening at times, but it was just the reality of New York City. And I just had to keep showing up, reach more people. And some people were more consistent. It's nearly 4 years now since COVID started spreading throughout the world. After all this time, and even since we're no longer in lockdown, but even since COVID, a lot of people are just not coming out to events. And so it no longer works to hold weekly events and have people show up and that's the means through which I sustain my practice. As I was sharing this, my business mentor instructor, she lit into me and she's saying that you're just blaming everyone for the fact that your life isn't working, which I didn't find that very helpful in any way. I'm willing to accept responsibility for my part and do everything I can to possibly face the issues that need to be dealt with. And then her partner, not too long before that, in a conversation, he's basically saying, "It's all in your head." It feels so invalidating. I don't find it in any way helpful. If anything, it just makes me feel worse about the situation. On the other hand, the past few years that I've trained with these individuals, I feel I've gained enormous amount of business skills. I've learned so much that I am and will continue to incorporate, to apply. The challenge there is just massive amount of information, a fire hose of all this different approaches to marketing. Much of it, as I look back, I realize it's probably not that well suited for me. And it wasn't until possibly about the last 6 months that I really began to gain a sense of, okay, well, this is what's going to work for me. This is an approach I can take that's actually going to fit my personality, what I have to offer. But it's kind of late in the game here. But of course, better late than ever. I feel that most people, even if it's wishful thinking on my part, are doing the absolute best they can with the resources and understanding that they possess. My instructors, I feel they buy in to some extent the law of attraction. And if you're living here in the United States within this bubble of reality that we experience here within the States, that can work more for you. Having spent time in India, Sri Lanka, other parts of the world, having friends from so many different parts of the world, knowing what they've gone through in their life and their friends and their families, it's harder to buy into that. It doesn't quite hold weight. One of the unfortunate things about the law of attraction is it can, in many respects, it invalidates other people's lived experiences and their authentic emotional responses. Yes, I was expressing my frustration, but blame? No, I'm just acknowledging the circumstances. I feel that's so important. We need to actually acknowledge the reality that we're dealing with and to be able to process, to digest our authentic emotional responses in order to be able to adapt ourselves to these changing realities. In 1994, when I first traveled to Boston, a friend who invited me out set up a radio interview and a corresponding speaking event. And even while I was still in the Boston College radio station, phone was ringing off the hook. Calls continued to come in the remainder of the day and the days thereafter. My schedule filled up quickly. And for some time afterwards, I'd be making trips to Boston about 4 times a year while I was still living in New Mexico. Even before getting into town, my schedule would be booked 2, 3 weeks in advance. More calls would come in, remaining openings would fill, and it would take me those 2 to 3 weeks to finish seeing everybody before I could get out of town. I would be dead exhausted by the time I left. But things started changing, and a lot of it with the advances in technology as people got on smartphone and then social media emerged and people were spending more time scrolling and swiping and becoming more distracted than ever before, and it was changing the way people's brains work. In so many ways, it pulls us out of our bodies and it disconnects us from our emotions. And I could see that people were losing touch with their inner core being. Whereas before, I would have a lot of the same people coming back. They would initially show up and they'd have certain presenting issues or concerns. And in many instances, those issues would have been either resolved or maybe we'd have made significant headway, and yet they were experiencing improvement in all these other areas of their life and their health and their relationships and so on. And so they're like, well, let's keep going. And as I said, I'd get a lot of referrals too. But then as people became more and more distracted, what happened is instead of that continuity, people were tending to show up either in class or to work with me in person, one on one, a time or two, and then they would just disappear. It was so disheartening, painful, frustrating at times. You can't heal when you're just sticking your toes in the water like that. The emotional wounding that people carry, the physiological health issues that people struggle with are, in many instances, years, if not decades in the making. And those first sessions, you're just barely getting the body to a place where it can begin to respond. That's why I recommend most people do somewhere between 6 to 10 sessions to really see results. As things were changing so dramatically, especially with the financial crash in 2009 when the banksters, with their risky financial maneuvers, the economy tanked, and all of a sudden, I didn't have much work, and it was terrifying. I'd be laying in bed at night, couldn't fall asleep, consumed by anxiety, and I'd breathe into all that fear and that anxiety and be asking myself, what am I going to do? How am I going to make it? And I would keep breathing through those feelings. But that's how I got the insights that after some time, oh, okay, I can start offering these classes every week. And that enabled me to adapt to the changing reality that I was facing. Yes, it was exhausting and sometimes frustrating with people so distracted. At first, using Meetup to promote classes in the beginning, I think about 60-80% of people who RSVP'd would show up. It got progressively worse. After some time, it was like 20 to 30% would show up. So I was dealing with that flakiness all the time. But the fact that I worked my ass off, I was able to maintain a practice. Now with COVID, reality continues to change. As it does, once again, I am forced to adapt. Now I work with people and have for many years now. Wide range of people have gone through just all kinds of challenges, ordeals, hardships, setbacks. Some have experienced disastrous relationships, devastating breakups. Some have suffered just horrendous trauma of one form or another. As I work with people, there are times that I see individuals within just a few sessions have these amazing breakthroughs and their lives are turning around. And yet, other people, sometimes they're either the emotional wounding is deeply entrenched, they've suffered rather severe trauma, their situations could be to some extent intractable, and it could be, or it can take considerably more time and effort, more hard work to turn this around, to get these individuals to a much better place. But what I've learned is so important is patience and persistence. As these individuals, those who continue to return, who continue to work with me individually one on one, and even more so when I can get them to do the practice on a daily basis, then the change, the transformation is deep and it's truly profound. As these individuals come to me and they will be relating, sharing with me how they feel about what's going on in their life, they're relating to me the events or the reality that they're dealing with. And sometimes they complain bitterly. They're expressing their frustration, their grief, their sadness, their disappointment. And rather than denying are discounting, I'm not gonna say there's no way I'm gonna say, "Oh, that's in your head." No, of course not. I'm gonna do everything I can, and I feel this is so important. We need to be able to validate, one, or first to acknowledge, it's like, what's happening? And to validate those experiences. Okay, so this is what you're dealing with, and it makes sense to me. I can see why you're feeling what you feel there. I probably would too. And maybe I have experienced a lot of these same feelings dealing with some of these same challenges myself at times. But then what I do is I have them bring into their awareness that challenge they're facing, that specific reality, the circumstance, the situation, those individuals that are involved, bring that fully into their awareness. And then I ask them, how does that feel in your body? What are the physical sensations in your body? How are you feeling emotionally in response to this reality that you're dealing with? Fill in the blank. That's going to vary according to each individual. And then as I have them connect, becoming fully present in their physical body with all the feelings and physical sensations, I have them breathe in the middle of everything they're feeling. And as they do so, what happens is it activates, it awakens this innate healing intelligence residing within their body and mind. What happens is they're doing this practice, and even more so as they work with me, the work that we do on the table, it's facilitating this deep, this profound transformation within their body and mind. They're coming up with workable solutions. They're developing a greater foundation, accessing the resources, which better enable them to address the challenges that they're facing in their lives. And so I'll see them becoming more highly functional so that they're able to step up to the challenge, to meet the challenge, and do what actually needs to be done. Now, as I said, it's critically important that we allow ourselves to go to these incredibly vulnerable places within ourselves. I know for me, I've had to do this in order to heal. And for some, that could make them very uncomfortable. But when people try to jump over the emotional component, what happens is these deeply wounding experiences and all the emotions attached to them, it freezes up in our bodies. And we need to be able to thoroughly digest these life experiences and our subsequent cognitive and emotional responses to it. Again, we need to be fully present to these vulnerable parts of ourselves to feel our authentic emotional responses. It's only as we do so, refer to my notes here, it's crucial for you to understand and acknowledge your feelings and allow yourself to fully experience and digest, actually digest both your experience and your authentic emotional responses. Because when you do so, it creates the space within, it enables you to access this deeper innate healing intelligence residing within your own body and mind. Of course, you need intervention too. There's a limit to what our healing intelligence can do, and sometimes we need the intervention. That's why I've worked with gifted healers myself. That's why I've gone many times through the Vision Quest. As we combine the practice, we combine the intervention, that's when true transformation occurs. This is when progress, real progress is made. Again, life is changing rapidly. It's no longer feasible for me to offer the weekly classes that I had relied on for years that enabled me to reach more people, to sustain my practice. And so I have to do things different, way different. Within the past however many months of filming this video here, I've started building a YouTube channel. But that's a pretty involved process. For some people, some can build it up and build that channel within relatively short period of time. But for many people, it's an ongoing process. It can take years to really gain traction. Other options, other things that I'm doing, there's live streaming, and that presents its own set of challenges. There have been times where I've invited guests to collaborate with me, and they would show up, even though I would send them some articles to read, other materials. They would show up completely unprepared. And so, being that they didn't have much to offer, I was left to basically have a conversation with myself. It was very uncomfortable for me to have to do that, but otherwise, it'd be sitting there, just nothing to say. Another instance, a guest, even though I'd previously spoken with them about this is what we want to address, as I was asking him the question, he interrupts me mid-question and he just veers off in some completely different direction. So one thing I've learned is it's much better for me to record in advance, and that way if someone shows up unprepared or if they do something else, I don't have to post it. I can delete it and I could save myself the embarrassment. Another option still, getting on other people's podcasts. But that in itself could be quite challenging. Podcasting has become its own weird universe. You have these podcast hosts, for instance, and many are concerned with boosting their following. So they're looking for other individuals who already have a large following that they could draw onto their podcast. I have to familiarize myself with these podcasts and the content they're putting out to see if it is worthwhile. And there's all this time and effort involved in messaging. But a lot of times, these hosts, even though I message, don't respond. So I wonder, are they getting my message? are are they not responding because I don't have this huge following? As I'm listening to all these podcasts, it can be overwhelming at times. But on the other hand, I'm also learning a lot of valuable things. I'm especially impressed with a lot of what I'm hearing from psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and some physicians and other individuals who have overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges in their lives. And yet, at the same time, there's also a limit to the realm of ideas and concepts. I spent years training with a traditional Native American doctor, a medicine man from the Kiowa tribe. I work with this extraordinarily powerful presence that can affect healing on so many levels within the physical body, facilitate the healing of trauma and other emotional wounding, far more powerful than just about anything else out there. And yet, most people just don't have any form of reference for this work. They've never experienced this form of healing or these traditional kinds of practices that have been passed down for centuries among the Native Americans and other indigenous forms of healing. So, yes, in some ways it can be frustrating and disappointing at times, but I have to be able to process what I'm feeling and just keep reaching out. One of my mottos is reach those you can, entertain the rest. Keep reaching out, see who bites, get on as many podcasts as I can. And as I do so, over time, the momentum will pick up. Again, as I said before, it's important for me to bring in the reality I'm facing into my awareness, the situation, the interactions I'm having, the individuals involved, see it, feel it, sense it as fully as I can, tune into what I'm feeling, the emotions, the physical sensations, and breathe with that. Breathe from the middle of all these feelings and sensations because as I do so, it helps me to process whatever sadness or frustration or confusion or whatever I'm dealing with. When something's not working, it makes it easier for me to just, okay, well, that's not working. Let that go. It keeps me more in the state of flow so I can continue to, again, to let go of what doesn't work and just keep moving forward with what is working and to recognize to embrace the opportunities that do come along. So we're all faced with challenges of one form or another, whatever it is that is important to you. to the best of your ability, get a sense of what it is you want in your life. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? What kinds of things do you want to experience? To the best of your ability, just be striving with each day to make that your reality, to make that happen. At times, you're going to encounter setbacks, and things are not necessarily always going to work in your favor. Sometimes there's going to be major roadblocks or just ship blowing up on you. At times, things will work for good for you day by day. It's also good to take time, sit down, close your eyes, bring your reality, whatever it is that you're facing, fully into your awareness. See it, feel it, sense it on as many levels as you can. Notice how you feel in your body, the physical sensations, your emotional response. Drop into the middle of that, be breathing softly and deeply. Stay as present as you can with what you feel, because as you continue to do so, that's going to enable you to process or digest your emotional responses to what's taking place. You'll gain insights, you'll gain understandings. And when you are doing this practice on a daily basis, and if you, as I do, you also combine the most effective therapeutic interventions. And that depends on what resources you have available. Maybe you can work with a massage therapist. Even psychotherapists can be very helpful to help you address some of the challenges you're facing. If you have access to the sensory deprivation flotation tanks, as you become still and you can allow all these feelings and sensations to come up, just being in that kind of environment can help your body and mind to process all these challenges. If you have the opportunity to work with a gifted healer such as myself, as I work with people, there's this extraordinarily powerful presence that works through me. As you work with me, you go into this dreamlike state, this profoundly deep, altered state, and it takes these life experiences that you're having and all these highly charged emotions, and it's enabling you to transform and then digest these experiences. And it's building this foundation so that you come out the other side with greater resources so that you're able to meet the challenges of daily life. I don't have anyone that I can work with, and so I have relied primarily on the Vision Quest. And I have this acute sense of what I can do, but I'm also acutely aware of where I hit the wall, what my limitations are. And so what I notice is I've continued to go on the Vision Quest, spending these 4 days and nights fasting alone in the mountains without food and water. And this presence descends into my body. It's working within me. As I go through that, I'm digesting the hardship, all these challenges I'm up against. And what I find is it's building this stronger, this more resilient foundation. I'm gaining access to these resources that I just didn't have access to before. And so my range of motion expands. I become that much more functional. So what I say is it's important we do the practice, and then we also make use of the most effective therapeutic interventions that we can access. And as we combine the practice and we intervention, we make much greater headway. So again, every endeavor or effort that you make is not necessarily going to work out, but there's something about as we make the effort, it initiates flow. And so as you do practice, you do the intervention, you make effort, when you're running into challenges or adversity, you go back in, you do more practice, and you continue to combine the interventions, and then you go back again. You keep striving, you continue to make the effort, because as you do so, it initiates the flow, it builds the momentum. And a lot of times you'll find that the energy that you invest comes back to you from unexpected sources. Oh, and one last thing, like this video, share this video with anyone you know will benefit, and subscribe. Bye for now.